Rewatching the first Doctor Strange, it's a pretty admirable addition to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, despite many of its flaws. With a story about an egocentric, overconfident surgeon with incredibly gifted abilities, only to tackle a task much bigger than himself for the good of humanity by becoming a superhero. The story is familiar and has its issues for sure, but the execution wasn't all too bad, especially from the filmmakers who made the 2012 horror film Sinister. Not to mention that it brought us the debut of the titular character played by Benedict Cumberbatch himself, and future conflicts and circumstances that he would contribute in with films like Avengers Infinity War and in the recent Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man No Way Home. Originally signing on to direct a sequel with Cumberbatch reprising his role, Scott Derrickson, the director, disbanded from the project in 2020 due to creative differences. And by the next month of that year, the directing reins were given over to someone who has had experience with the comic book movie genre and has played a significant part in my childhood. That, of course, would be the director, Sam Raimi, who many of you know directed the world-renowned Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy and his horror classics that defined his career, the Evil Dead movies. And when he was signed on into the project, Sam Raimi had one particular goal for this Doctor Strange sequel: to make it become a horror film in the MCU. Now, from just hearing that announcement alone, this may sound like a positive, seeing how Sam Raimi's work is exceptional and his horror efforts are second to none. But when you're in the fourth phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, a phase where the multiverse is said by Kevin Feige to be the next step in the evolution of the MCU, but the abilities and the world building's execution is full of contradictions. Fan favorite characters are literal shadows of their former selves, and the narratives by these new writers have gotten much lazier and more reliant on spectacle than cohesiveness. Not to mention the extensive reshoots and the COVID delays to follow suit. My confidence in a Doctor Strange sequel would descend deeper than the Mariana Trench. But I gave it a chance and I hoped for the best. But after watching this movie, I gotta tell ya, all my investment for the MCU is almost completely gone. Because with all brutal honesty, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is not only a sore disappointment in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it quite possibly may be one of the weakest films in the entire franchise. And I know what some of you are probably asking. Why is that? And what does the writer of Loki have to offer to us in his latest cinematic writing assignment? Brace yourselves. Doctor Strange seems to be receiving dreams of events that happened in the multiverse with a girl named America Chavez, who has the power to transport across dimensions, only to realize that his visions have come to fruition as he notices that this girl is being hunted down by a ravenous monster in his universe. Now, why is this interdimensional monster and many others trying to chase her down, you inquire? Well, it actually turns out that the demons were actually controlled by Wanda Maximoff, because she knows that if she can harness America's power, she can control the multiverse, allowing her to reunite with her children that she created in WandaVision, and she will do it even if it results in several, if not hundreds of casualties. So Doctor Strange, Wong, and America must find a way to save the multiverse from the telekinetic clutches of the Scarlet Witch. Firstly, if there's something that I have to commend and condemn to start this review off, I feel like it is of dire importance that I talk about the acting and the characters. Because of how good the performances are in this movie, the writing for the characters is pretty weak, especially with one that I'll get to later. For starters, Benedict Cumberbatch is still worthy of admiration as Stephen Strange, but this movie doesn't give him strong material other than a middling character arc of him trying to let go of Christine because of the events that transpired after the snap. Somebody he really cared about in the first movie that didn't have a lot of development to begin with, despite the actors bouncing off each other well in their parts. And his character continues to fall off the deep end, with examples such as him not putting his enemies in the mirror dimension without risking innocent lives. Or, and this is what baffled me the most, not even going after Wanda and stopping her from mind controlling the entirety of Westview in WandaVision. And when the two do decide to talk about it, it's only finished in a few seconds by Doctor Strange saying, "Wanda, what you did was undeniably evil. But you know what? You put things right at the end, so that's all that matters. You're okay. No big deal." Our main hero, ladies and gentlemen. Xochitl Gomez as America Chavez is fine, but for her material, she's basically a plot device with interdimensional superpowers. She has no depth whatsoever for us to care about her, and her entire conflict of trying to control her powers is resolved by just a hollow, half-assed message. Even her backstory is meant to be tragic, but in execution is actually kind of hilarious and ridiculous, especially with how the film is able to present said memory. It's the laziest form of providing exposition I've seen in a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, and it doesn't even provide sufficient enough characterization for a character that doesn't even need to be in the movie. Benedict Wong as Wong is very good, however, the writing doesn't give him much to fall back on, as he is also given the biggest plot armor the movie has to offer. As in, there's a part in the movie where he gets pushed off of a building and he lands on a little stem of a cliff after this extremely deep fall, and he survives. Last and definitely least is the one character that I am going to spend a lot of time talking about, because she is the main crux of this movie's conflict. Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch, is not well written in this film. And it's unfortunate because Elizabeth Olsen is simply sensational in this movie. In fact, she is perhaps, acting-wise, the biggest highlight of the film. If we separate from how she is being handled in the script, and we will get to that in a moment, the way she portrays her character in a focused and wicked manner, in a fashion that makes her a believable force of destruction, is simply mesmerizing. And if there's one thing about Sam Raimi's influential directing style since the Evil Dead movies, it's that when combined with the talent of Olsen herself, he can make Wanda absolutely creepy. Like going on a murderous rampage in a high-tech facility that Strange and America are in and chasing them down as if she were one with the undead. Not to mention the violence she causes in her action scenes mixed up for gruesome imagery that certainly earns its hard PG-13 rating. Her movements and her delivery not only strike fear into the hearts of the viewers, but she is also impeccably captivating when she takes her character into a very emotional, heartbroken state. But, much like her own show, what really damages Wanda is the writing. I've heard some people say that the Scarlet Witch has an impactful character arc, and that while her plan may be disagreeable, is certainly understandable. I have no idea what kind of character they were watching, but it certainly wasn't what was on screen. Before this movie was released, my one big wish is that if the film is going to be slightly better than I hoped it would be, the film would have to make Wanda the villain. Since her decision to enslave and torture all of Westview to be in her fantasy land for personal catharsis is inexcusable, and that she needs to be held accountable for her actions and perhaps redeemed in the future. And yes, she is the villain of the film, as she should be. But the execution and the plan that she has makes no sense at all. There is a golden defense made that all of her devilish actions are influenced by the Darkhold, as said in a throwaway line by Doctor Strange. I find that impossible to believe because it actually turns out that she is autonomous and capable of making these vicious decisions on her own accord. If she was consumed by the evil book's power completely, why is she able to make decisions on her own so easily, willing to spare a life to one person in one instance, and give Doctor Strange and those in Camartage a day to hand over America Chavez to her? Same applying to murdering a group full of people just so she can get personal vindication. Either I'm led to believe that the Darkhold's possession is entirely inconsistent for how the script wanted it to be portrayed, or I'm just led to believe that Wanda is just a total psychopath and willing to do these decisions without the Darkhold's corruption. The film has no idea how to execute this, and there's no sense of Wanda trying to resist the persuasiveness of the Darkhold ever in the film. You know that particular moment in one of the trailers that fans were gushing about on social media of how Wanda was scolding Doctor Strange about the fact that he breaks the rules and he gets considered a hero. She breaks the rules and she gets considered the villain. Guys, it's not as powerful as you think. Whereas Wanda is breaking the rules out of selfish desires just because she wants to see her kids from a different universe, Strange did so out of obligation to save the universe from the likes of Dormammu and Thanos, even going so far as to sacrificing his life for it. Even the Ancient One implied in the first Doctor Strange movie that breaking the rules is sometimes necessary for the greater good. So yeah, you two are very different from one another. And you know what, Wanda? If you're so committed on trying to reunite with your fake children, or if they're so real to you, have you ever tried, I don't know, creating them just like you did with Vision? Better yet, how about you just spontaneously create a dome around that secluded area of hers at the end of WandaVision, away from people, and you can have your reality there. Why do you even need to go through all this trouble, like sending monsters after America, when you can just manipulate her and harvest her powers yourself? Oh, because she says that sending monsters after America instead of her was her being merciful. What? And by the way, her plan can't even work, because if she were to go to a different universe, one, the kids she wants to take as her own are from a different dimension and are being raised by another Wanda as their mom. What does Wanda think will happen if the kids are terrified or disapprove of her if she were to do something bad to the other Wanda, or the fact that there's an evil witch in their house? Or better yet, why not have Wanda go to one where they're orphans? Which leads to number 2. Regardless, it would cause an incursion, which means if she were to stay in that universe with her fake kids, she, her home universe, and the universe that she invades in will perish. And the worst part, nobody tells her this while she's going around killing people just so she can get her children in another universe who aren't even hers in the first place. Like, I'm at a total loss for words. I mean, this might be one of the most discordant and broken villain plans that I have ever seen in the MCU. From the plan itself, to the reasoning of said plan, to the execution of the plan, and to the results of said plan. Wanda Maximoff deserved better than this, and there was so much potential for her character. But how she's developed since the end of WandaVision, from acknowledging that she has made mistakes and isolating herself away from justice, to becoming a bloodthirsty psychotic just to get what she wants, is just incredibly staggering, and is quite possibly one of the most devastating character assassinations that I've seen in a superhero movie. How anyone can be a fan of her character in Phase 4, especially after this movie, is just beyond me. Wow, that was a mouthful. Let's change the subject, shall we? With all of the errors that you witnessed with the characters, the exact same thing can be said with the most important aspect of a movie: the plot. There was a seminar by Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the creators of South Park, and they talked about how good storytelling is generated. And they do it with using 2 key words: but and therefore. This happens, therefore this happens. But this happens, therefore this happens. And if you use the words and then to progress your story, you're screwed. This movie is very much an and then story. Nothing in this movie runs on cause and effect, and it shoots itself in the foot so many times that you could barely see the foot being visible. There are several instances where the writer Michael Waldron writes himself into a corner, and the only way to move on to the next scene is that, something happens, and we're just gonna have to move on whether you like it or not, even if it destroys and contradicts the lore of the MCU. How do we have Wanda escape the mirror dimension, which you can't do without a sling ring? She does this. I don't know. How should we allow Wanda to get past a certain group of heroic cameos? Well, let's just have one of the cameos, who's known for being the smartest man in the world, just explain one of its friend's deadly abilities right in front of Wanda, which leads to his and his friend's demise. And this isn't me nitpicking either. Everything in this movie happens in a very contrived and nonsensical manner. And if you thought it was just a couple, this movie has more of that and then some. However, if I have to go back and discuss the positives for this movie, I would have to say that since it touts itself as being one with the horror genre, the harrowing cinematography and the atmosphere do an outstanding job, not only in an artistic, wide scope sense, but to provide and establish inevitable dread for our protagonists. Zoom-in shots of Wanda's zombie-like gaze, to creepy close-up shots of an eye in a puddle with violent spikes as Danny Elfman's haunting score comes into the fray. His talent really shows that he is capable of creating a horrifying superhero tale just like what he did with Darkman. And it's a shame it's with a movie like this. And whenever you do get your slice of humor in this movie, because it's a Marvel movie, it's pretty much par for the course that it will be included, it's sometimes pretty juvenile and at certain points, tonally bizarre. There was a character in this movie who was in the first Doctor Strange film, and he played the competing surgeon. He talks to Strange about his situation after the snap, and he starts off by saying that he lost his cats, as if it was supposed to be a joke, but He also adds that after a long pause by saying that he also lost his brother. I mean, talk about a tonal whiplash. Whose idea was to even write it like that? Where was the joke? Lastly, this movie has its wondrous and visual surprises when it comes to the special effects, and for the most part, they are very polished when it comes to a character's powers, or in certain sequences that are indeed marvelous to watch on the big screen. A fine example is a scene where Strange in America hop through different dimensions, such as the Cretaceous period with dinosaurs, one where their faces turn into cubes, or one where they're modeled entirely out of paint. Each universe has a very distinct and vibrant look to them, making one stand out just as much as the other, and gives a very clear idea of what certain universes look like outside of our own. That's not to say that there isn't some janky, uncanny visual effects, especially when compositing where you can see the actor's outline, especially when they're in front of a creature or in the background, because there most certainly are. With all that being said, Multiverse of Madness is the finest example in the fourth phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe that spectacle, fan service, and presentation can get you so far before you begin to notice that the characters and the plot are falling apart before your very eyes. It's just that these writers and these producers only care about setting up more movies, more TV shows, more content, and they don't care whether the writing is not up to par because they will continue to sucker our money for it. I remember when things were much more simpler and consistent with the rules. I remember when we had well-written stories such as the first Avengers. We used to have such awesome content from the first 3 phases. Now, it's only a matter of time before the Marvel Cinematic Universe can come back to their former glory. Remember when we had well-written character journeys in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Yeah, I miss those days. I really do. My name is Luke Nukem, and you, my friends, have been blown away.
Such raw power could wreak havoc on this and other worlds. Her sacrifice would be for the greater good.
Shut it!